Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that's both fascinating and, let's be real, a little scandalous. The sex lives of ancient Egyptian pharaohs. Yeah, you heard that right. When we think about ancient Egypt, we usually picture the pyramids, powerful pharaohs, and all those intricate hieroglyphs. It all seems so majestic and larger than life. But behind all that grandeur was a hidden world, a world full of secrets and some pretty surprising, sometimes shocking practices. We're talking about the rulers of one of the most iconic civilizations in history, the pharaohs. They weren't just kings and queens. They were seen as living gods. Their public image was always about power, control, and devotion. But what about their private lives? What really went on behind the palace doors and in the shadows of those pyramids? That's what we're digging into today. Now, figuring out the truth about the pharaohs' private lives isn't exactly easy. We're trying to piece together fragments of history that are thousands of years old. Our clues come from tomb inscriptions that are packed with symbolic language, which takes some serious detective work to interpret. There's also the papyrus texts, which sometimes get pretty explicit, detailing rituals, beliefs, and even erotic encounters. And then there are the artifacts, the things that have been unearthed from the sands of time, each one telling part of the story. The tricky part is that so much of this evidence is up for interpretation. Ancient Egyptians loved using symbolism, and their depictions of sex were often tied up with mythology, religion, and magic. So, trying to separate fact from fiction, ritual from real life, that's not easy. But I promise, it's worth the effort, because what we uncover isn't just shocking or surprising. It gives us a glimpse into a culture that saw sexuality in ways completely different from how we do today. It shows us more than just their desires. It reveals the power dynamics and what it really meant to be a pharaoh behind the public image. So stick around as we unravel the mysteries of these ancient rulers' private lives. Some of what we find might surprise you, maybe even shock you. Get ready to dive into the fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling world of ancient Egypt's royal families. Today, we're talking about something that defined their power and lineage, incestuous royal marriages. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like something straight out of Game of Thrones, but the reasoning behind it was a lot more complicated. The ancient Egyptians believed their pharaohs were descended directly from the gods. Their bloodlines were seen as sacred, pure, and the key to maintaining a divine connection. So, keeping that divine blood within the family was crucial to them. How'd they do it? By marrying siblings or close relatives. Imagine for a moment that your family was seen as the bridge between humanity and the gods, responsible for the prosperity of an entire kingdom. You probably want to keep that power close too, right? For the Egyptians, these marriages weren't about romance. They were about preserving a link to the divine and securing the authority of the ruling family. Take King Tut, for example. DNA tests show his parents were likely siblings, probably Akhenaten and one of his sisters. And Akhenaten himself? He was also a product of a close-kin marriage. This wasn't rare. Many pharaohs marry their sisters, half-sisters, or even daughters. It wasn't just a habit. It was part of their culture and belief system. But let's clear up a misconception. Not every pharaoh married within the family. While it was common during certain periods, it wasn't an absolute rule. Some rulers chose wives from noble families or married foreign princesses to form alliances and bring new bloodlines into the mix. The degree of inbreeding varied over time, depending on the political and social circumstances. Of course, there are consequences. Take King Tut again. He had a range of health problems, like a club foot, a cleft palate, and likely even malaria. While we can't say for sure that all of this was caused by inbreeding, it definitely didn't help. Generations of close-kin marriages can lead to genetic defects, which ironically weakened the very bloodline they were trying to protect. This practice gives us a glimpse into how ancient Egyptians saw the world. For them, power, religion, and family were tightly intertwined. What feels taboo to us today was for them a duty, something they believed upheld the order of the universe. Their stories are complex, fascinating, and a reminder of just how different their world was from ours. Imagine a world of lavish palaces, fragrant gardens, and whispered secrets. This wasn't just the pharaoh's home, it was a miniature version of Egyptian society. At the center of it all was the harem. Now, when you hear harem, you might picture something straight out of fantasy, but the truth was way more complicated. It was a structured, political space full of power plays, alliances, and, occasionally, love. The women in the harem weren't just there for the pharaoh's pleasure. They were secondary wives and concubines, chosen for their beauty, intelligence, and family connections. Some were daughters of nobles, offered to create political alliances. Others were foreign princesses, gifts from faraway kingdoms, symbols of Egypt's power on the world stage. Imagine the mix of stories and backgrounds these women brought with them as they entered this extravagant yet confined world. Life in the harem was a strange balance of privilege and control. These women lived in beautifully decorated apartments with fine linens, luxurious perfumes, and servants attending to their every need. They were educated, entertained by musicians, and surrounded by luxury. But it came at a cost. Every part of their life was controlled by the pharaoh. Their movements were limited, their interactions monitored. It was essentially a gilded cage. Even getting into the harem was its own process. Royal scribes traveled across the land to find young women who fit the pharaoh's exact standards. Of course, beauty was a top priority, but intelligence and grace mattered just as much. It was like an ancient beauty pageant, but with much higher stakes. Those chosen entered a world where they could either climb the ranks or fade into obscurity. One of the most fascinating stories is that of Hennetai, a concubine of Ramesses III. She didn't have royal blood, but she worked her way up, earning the pharaoh's favor. Eventually, her influence became so significant that she was granted her own tomb in the royal necropolis, something unheard of for someone not born into royalty. You have to wonder, what made Hennetai stand out? How did she manage to navigate the tricky politics of the harem? But the harem wasn't all luxury and serenity. It was often a place of drama and intrigue. Rivalries were constant, as concubines competed for the pharaoh's attention and the power that came with it. These struggles didn't just impact the women, they could ripple out and affect the entire kingdom. Imagine the whispers, alliances, and betrayals that happened behind those walls. And then there were the children. The harem wasn't just about the pharaoh, it was also where future generations were raised. While not all of the children were in line for the throne, they were still princes and princesses, raised in luxury and connected to the royal court. The harem, in this way, was more than a private world. It was a cornerstone of the royal dynasty, shaping Egypt's future. The relationships, ambitions, and dramas of the harem pulled back the curtain on a fascinating and very human side of ancient Egyptian power. Power, politics, and family all came together within the world of the harem. But the pharaoh's role went way beyond just their personal life. Their influence was tied to Egyptian spirituality. Sexuality wasn't just private, it was sacred. It played a key role in ancient Egyptian beliefs, and we're going to explore what that really meant. When you think about ancient Egypt, you probably picture massive pyramids and temples. But behind these monuments was a deep respect for the life-giving power of sexuality. Fertility wasn't just about having kids. It symbolized the prosperity of the land, the success of the harvest, and the continuation of life itself. The pharaoh, seen as the living link to the divine, was front and center in making sure this life force kept flowing. Take the Nile River, for example, the source of Egypt's life. Its yearly floods brought fertile soil that renewed the land and kept the crops growing. This natural cycle became deeply connected to the pharaoh's vitality and, yes, even their sexual energy. Public ceremonies and rituals were often performed to symbolically channel this power, ensuring the land's fertility and life's balance. One famous example is the Sed Festival. It was kind of like a royal anniversary, held after a pharaoh ruled for 30 years and then repeated periodically. It was all about showing the pharaoh's strength and vitality, reinforcing their right to rule. While historians are still debating the details, we know these celebrations involve processions, offerings, and rituals that symbolized renewal, tying the pharaoh's authority directly to fertility and balance. This connection wasn't just about ceremonies. It was everywhere in Egyptian art and mythology. Look at the god Min, often shown with an erect phallus, representing fertility and creation. Amulets in the shape of genitalia weren't jokes. They were symbols of life and protection. Even the ankh, the symbol of life, might represent the union of male and female energy. Sexuality wasn't taboo. It was central to how they understood the world and the universe. Talking about this can feel tricky. These were beliefs and practices very different from the ones we have now, and it's important not to judge ancient cultures by today's standards. To really understand their world, we have to think about the mix of religion, politics, and symbolism that shaped their lives. When you start digging deeper, it becomes clear this wasn't just about physical acts. Sexuality in ancient Egypt was a cosmic force. It was about connecting the pharaoh, the gods, and the survival of the entire kingdom. It was life itself. And that's what makes exploring this part of their culture not just interesting, but incredibly important. When we look into the lives of people from thousands of years ago, things can get complicated. Some of their practices and beliefs definitely don't sit well with us today. And that's especially true when it comes to ancient Egypt. The information we have is incomplete, open to interpretation, and can be pretty sensitive. We're talking about things like sacred prostitution and even whispers of bestiality. It's important to remember how easy it is to misread the past. We're looking at a culture through a modern lens, and our own values and assumptions shape how we see things. When it comes to something as personal as sex, the chance for misunderstanding is huge. We've got some depictions and texts that hint at these practices, but context is everything. What do these acts mean? Were they common or part of specific rituals? These are questions historians are still trying to answer. Take the idea of sacred prostitution in temples, for example. Some think it involved sexual acts as a way to honor certain gods or as part of fertility rituals. But others say this idea comes from shaky evidence and outdated interpretations, especially ones influenced by Victorian moral views. Instead, they argue that women in temples probably had more diverse roles, like handling music, administration, and other important duties. The truth is, it's complicated, and we might never know for sure. Then there's the even trickier subject of bestiality. There are some depictions that seem to suggest it, but are they literal? Could they be symbolic? Maybe they relate to rituals or myths we don't fully understand yet. It's easy to misinterpret these things, and there's always a risk of projecting modern fears onto an ancient culture. That's why we have to be really careful and acknowledge just how little we truly know. This is where historians and archaeologists come in. Their job isn't just to uncover the past, but to interpret it carefully. They bring different perspectives, point out the gaps in our knowledge, and challenge assumptions. It's about separating facts from speculation and evidence from guesswork. So what do you think? How can we approach these sensitive topics without imposing our own beliefs? How do we make sure we're being fair to a culture so different from our own? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is an important conversation, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. So, we've covered some pretty personal details about the lives of the pharaohs, haven't we? But it's worth keeping in mind, this isn't just about modern-day curiosity or judgment. These practices were a core part of ancient Egyptian society. You can see in their art, their writings, even their social structures. Just think about the massive statues, the carvings on temple walls, the hieroglyphs. You'll notice they weren't shy about showing sexuality. And it wasn't just about romance or passion. It symbolized fertility, the life-giving power of the Nile, the continuation of dynasties, basically their whole worldview. But what about the regular people? Do they see it the same way? That's where it gets tricky. We can't assume everyone shared the same beliefs as the pharaohs or the elite. Sexuality showed up in rituals, festivals, and religious practices outside the palace, but probably in ways that felt more personal or varied. Take Hathor, for example. She was a goddess associated with motherhood, love, and also sensuality and joy. That gives us a hint that sexuality wasn't just one-dimensional. It was part of a bigger picture in their culture. And like any society, things changed over time. Dynasties rose and fell, religions evolved, and norms shifted. Something totally normal in the Old Kingdom could feel outdated or even taboo by the time of the New Kingdom, which was hundreds of years later. It's fascinating to see how these changes played out and what reshaped their views. Now, comparing Egypt to other ancient civilizations makes it even more interesting. Take ancient Greece, for example. They also had gods and goddesses tied to love and fertility, but their rituals and cultural norms were completely different, like the symposiums or the way sexuality showed up in their mythology. Or look at the Romans, who were way more explicit with their art and literature. Every civilization had its own way of approaching sexuality, with its own rules and customs. Then there's the link between power, religion, and sexuality. In a lot of ancient cultures, including Egypt, rulers claimed divine authority, and that often extended to their sexual practices. It was another way to reinforce their role as a bridge between the gods and the people. You see similar patterns elsewhere, like Inca emperors in South America or the divine emperors of Japan. The details vary, but the connection between power and religion repeats across history. Finally, let's think about what all of this means for us today. It's easy to feel shocked or intrigued by some of these stories, but we have to be careful not to judge ancient Egypt by modern standards. Instead, we should try to understand these practices in their historical context. Sure, some of it might seem strange to us now, but for them, it all had meaning. These weren't just spicy details. They were reflections of a deeply complex society. And honestly, getting a little glimpse into that world feels like one of the most fascinating ways to understand humanity. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Hit that notification bell to stay updated. What topic should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below.